I knew that that he had died, and like I just and I that was all that I could really kind of experience was seeing that last moment where you know, like I know that I was the last face that he saw. I know that, like I have no doubt about that.
Karen, a lot of people could have been hurt in this violence literally outside the front door, and you can see the bullet holes, one on the corner of this painting and another literally in the front door. And if it wasn't for the bravery of the people behind that door, more people could have been injured or hurt.
Don't actually remember a whole lot about the earlier part of the day other than I had worked a shift knowing that it was busy because it was Memorial Day weekend.
We're sitting, chatting, having, happy hour, and all of a sudden I hear three like loud pops, like pop, pop, pop.
I think Gabby and I both stood up and kind of had this sort of, I think, reflective moment within each other where we said like, this isn't right, something's wrong, and by the time I think we were acknowledging that eye contact between one another, the victim had fallen into the building, and at that point he was in a kind of defensive posture, and for me all of this really kind of slowed down, and when this started to happen, the next 5 seconds felt like a couple of minutes.
Immediately after that happened, I see Sebastian walk in, and I hear two more pops pointed at the ground, and I stood up and kind of bolted towards the back of the restaurant.
My thought was that this was some sort of terrorist attack or some shit like that, or just a shooting, and not like an altercation between just two individuals. So immediately I start shooing Gabby out, and because of where we were sat, there wasn't really many people behind me. I knew that I was kind of at the back of the train, and my fight or flight sort of kicked in, and immediately I nearly shoving Gabby to get her out of the building. But at the same token, right as we started around the corner from right at the table where the victim and the shooter ended up being the ones that were sat there, right as we rounded that corner, I just had this thought that I was going to get mowed down and that we were all going to get shot in the back. And I just immediately turned back around and went straight towards the shooter. And at that point, I already saw Griff, and I'm pretty sure Brian is his name, but I saw Griff and the kitchen manager at the time, disarm Sebastian, the shooter, and so I immediately went straight to the victim. And when I first got to him, I could see that he had multiple gunshot wounds in his abdomen and his chest, and he was starting to lose a lot of blood really, really quickly. So the first thing I did was try to put some pressure on the multiple bullet holes that was starting to become evident, and right in that moment, he was obviously very terrified, and he just kept saying like, he shot me, I can't believe he shot me. And I right as that was happening, I was trying to put pressure on his wounds, and then he sorry, he ended up having what I feel like was like kind of his last moment, and he grabbed my hand and like said, he was like I can't believe this, and I said it's okay, and I kind of saw the lights go out of his eye, and with that he took a really big gasp and then stopped breathing, and you could tell that he was between hyperventilating and not breathing at all, and just wasn't able to catch any air. So I immediately started trying to do compressions.
Jumped out. I remember feeling in that alleyway, like, oh my gosh, I'm kind of freaking out. It was really freaky. And I remember saying to one of the female bartenders, I don't remember her name, I was like, oh, I've never experienced anything like this before. And she's like, none of us have. I'm like, you're right. Like, we're all experiencing something very new.
We've learned the accused killer and the victim met earlier at a party. Investigators say the shooter, Louis Sebastian, had been invited to the same party as the victim, Chris King. Here's what a court record indicates. Both men were interested in the same woman who was throwing the party, and everybody went to the restaurant afterwards. When the bill arrived, the group was $100 short on the bill. That prompted an argument between Sebastian and King. They went outside the restaurant. That's when the shooting started. The restaurant chef subdued Sebastian until police arrived.
Also question whether or not the victim himself, like I don't understand the choices he was making to get into a place where he thought it was a good idea to go outside and get in a fist fight with a guy who I think was probably about 20 years younger than him, over what I had heard that night was politics, and then later a girl, and sounds like some real trivial bullshit that, you know, like no one should die over any sort of argument ever, but like that, like it just seemed fucking senseless. And it sucks that it was such a low caliber, because he might have survived it if it had been something a little bit higher caliber. That they said that it like basically ricocheted inside his body like multiple times. It just tore up his internal organs. And that's why there was no saving him, you know, and that there was no exit wound through the back.
No, it was really weird and nerve-wracking, kind of scary. And when I got up there, I kind of froze a little bit. I didn't really know what to say, even though I had been interviewed before about it. And yeah, the prosecution felt more tough on me with their questioning than the defense.
Doesn't work like that for me, and I've just, it's so closely connected to my life now, and it really defined who I am, and I honestly feel a sense of pride for being a person who made a decision to go back in that situation, you know, and I feel proud of myself for that. So I felt like that was a real self-defining moment that you can't have unless you experience something incredibly traumatic. I still don't really feel a sense of closure. I mean, just yesterday, those guys that drove by and yelled out the car, that fucking scared the shit out of me, and it like immediately put some idiots just screamed really loud to like startle us while they were driving down Moorhead, and it fucking, like, I was trembling. I get like these responses now from really like kind of intentionally scary stimulus or like startling things that like I just get really shook up over it. So I don't really think that I have closure.
It was back in 2017 that 33-year-old Louis Sebastian shot and killed Chris King. Happened at the Bramble and Hare near the Pearl Street Mall. Investigators say the two were fighting over the same woman. Right after the verdict, the judge sentenced Sebastian to life in prison without the possibility of parole.